Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show on this 18th day of October, 2021. Up first, we've got no watches, warnings, or advisories out, any public watches, warnings, or advisories out across the state for the next day or so, maybe longer. And so moving right into satellite imagery, you can see a pretty good system just east of Kodiak Island, frontal system also pushing up across the eastern Gulf of Alaska, spreading some mid and high level clouds in across the Panhandle, eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast interior, and some of that high stuff reaching westward into northern Cook Inlet. But clear skies, Bristol Bay and Shelikof Strait right up into the interior there until you hit some clouds north of the Alaska Range, say around Fairbanks, and gets a little thicker up over the Yukon Flats, North Slope, and the Arctic coast there. Another frontal system, starting to weaken now as it pushes eastward across the Pribilof Islands, bringing 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts to St. Paul, St. George Island today, and east-southeast winds gusting to 40 miles an hour, St. Lawrence Island. Precipitation so far on the light side most everywhere. Not a lot of moisture even over the eastern Aleutians with that, but Kodiak had half an inch of precipitation, as did Middleton Island. There on the back side of that system, Kodiak earlier today had 54-mile-an-hour wind gusts as well, and wind gusts just under 60 miles an hour, close to 60 miles an hour at Middleton Island with that system. And southeast winds, or east-southeast winds, along the Panhandle, right along the coastline there, picking up today 35 to 45 miles an hour, with the moisture staying just off the coast, and about the same for the North Gulf Coast as well. Not much moisture reaching the area yet, but probably will overnight tonight. Some areas of light snow up over the northern interior and the central and eastern Arctic coast today, with colder temperatures up that way, below zero this afternoon with some clear skies on the western Arctic coast, running anywhere from 0 to 5 below on the western coastline there, and temperatures in the teens elsewhere for the North Slope and the Arctic coast, with those pretty gusty winds out of the west up to 30-35 miles an hour for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, dropping those wind chills, I believe, down below zero, with temperatures in the lower to mid-teens. But you can see way back out west again, conditions improving. That low center kind of dropping southeastward, but not all that fast there, hanging back to the kind of hanging back as the front pushes eastward. So the front's starting to weaken there, especially as you can see over the Pribilof. It's almost like it's starting to split. And on the chart today, though, bringing some moisture into St. Lawrence Island, especially more of an increase in the wind than an increase in the precipitation. Same thing for roughly Nunivak Island. But stronger winds over the Pribilof, I mentioned, gusting 40, 45 miles an hour, and that front trailing down into the central Aleutians. And some rain continued today, moderate, beginning to lighten up, though, as well as the winds lightening up. Kodiak Island this afternoon, strongest on the east side there. But just grazing the coastline, precipitation with that front, getting onto the Kenai Peninsula a little bit there, but not too much, and then just grazing the Panhandle, more of an increase in the winds there and the cloud cover. But the interior dry, a few more clouds over the mid and upper Yukon River than what I've got shown there, which is clear, but it's not actually clear. But the snow up on the northeastern North Slope Arctic coast pretty well nails the pattern up there. And for tonight, we'll see dry conditions, maybe some lingering low clouds with some flurries, IFR flying conditions, eastern Arctic coast. Those winds dropping off as high pressure builds in, moves over the area there, while winds start to pick up over the northwest interior and western Arctic coast, and quite windy with mixture precipitation, warmer air sliding northward ahead of that front, so it may start out as snow at sea level, but that'll mix with rain as those winds kick in out of the south and southeast. So mixture precipitation trending toward rain at lower elevations, all the Yukon Delta coast, pushing inland to the Kuskokwim Mountains toward morning. Trailing edge bringing some rain into the Alaska Peninsula, and then stronger winds, several troughs rotating around that low center, and fairly tight gradient there. Gale force winds across the Bering Sea and much of the Aleutians for tomorrow, Rain continues Kodiak Island, a little breezy, but continuing downward trend, and some rain pushes inland to the Panhandle. For Tuesday, kind of right along the coast, best chance of precipitation. Whatever falls will be light. A little cloudier, a little better chance of moisture. Southern Alaska stays dry to the north, and temperatures stay on the cool side up there, in the teens for the afternoon highs. And then windy and wet for the Bering Sea. Big storm comes into the western Aleutians, pushing wind and possible storm force winds, gale force anyway, into the central Aleutians with that warm front, moderate amounts of rain into Adak and Atka. And weak front makes a better chance of rain over the southeast coast. Lows for tonight in the Panhandle, 30s to mid 40s there. Otherwise, a little under 20 degrees for the Copper River Basin, 20s to mid 30s elsewhere. About 19 for McGrath and Nikolai. Highs tomorrow, mid 40s Kodiak Island, southern Kenai Peninsula. Upper 40s, lower 50s for the Panhandle, mid to upper 30s over the interior. And the lows following morning, mid 20s to mid 30s to near 40 for Kodiak Island, and 40 to 45 for the southeast coast, followed by highs Wednesday afternoon, 40 to 45. West of the Alaska Range, though, 35 to 40. Lower 40s Bristol Bay, upper 40s Kodiak Island, Homer, Seldovia, and lower to mid 50s, warmest over the southern Panhandle. Craig Cloac looking at 56 for your high. Lows tonight up north near 0, Brooks Range 0 to 10 for the lows, Brooks Range North Slope, and single numbers and teens for the Arctic coast, teens and 20s south of the area through the central interior. And Wednesday morning lows up that way, definitely in the 20s to near 30 in the central interior, a little milder up to the north there, mid-teens to lower 20s, followed by highs 25 to 30 Arctic coast North Slope, 35 to 40 central interior, out to St. Lawrence Island, out west. Lows near freezing along the coast, but much milder, well above freezing over the Aleutian southern Bering Sea. Highs lower to mid 40s, followed by lows 30s, followed by highs in the 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
IFR, eastern Arctic coast, otherwise marginal VFR for the North Slope and into the Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley areas, and then southeastward there. Across the Yukon Flats to 40 Mile Country, Central Interior, VFR, Northwest Coast, and Noatak Valley, DeLong Mountains, VFR, including Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. IFR, though, Bering Strait, over to Golovin and Nome, White Mountain, down across St. Lawrence Island, Southwest Coast, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta to the Kuskokwim Mountains, into northern Bristol Bay there, cutting off right around King Salmon, otherwise marginal VFR, Cook Inlet, Western Alaska Range to the Aleutian Range, IFR across the Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR, Fox Islands, otherwise Pribilofs, and central western Aleutians VFR, VFR for the Panhandle, IFR, eastern Kodiak Island, southern Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and into the western Copper River Basin, marginal VFR to the Talkeetnas. And for the afternoon, it looks like for the Panhandle, some lowering conditions, IFR hitting the coast and edging its way eastward. IFR for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound into the southern Copper River Basin, northern Cook Inlet, and Madanuska released the Susitna Valley. Madanuska Valley probably seen some IFR over toward the eastern part of the valley there in the afternoon. IFR southern Cook Inlet, southwest interior Kuskokwim Valley, all IFR, northern Bering Sea. Western southern Seward Peninsula, IFR. Point Hope, Cape Lisburne now IFR, with IFR across the Arctic coast. VFR, Aleutians. VFR holds for most of the Aleutians, marginal for Shimei and Attu, though. You can see the VFR zone there into the Alaska Peninsula, marginal for the Pribilofs. IFR from southern Cook Inlet, across Iliamna Lake, southern Kuskokwim Valley, all of the southwest interior out to the coastline to Makoriak. And then IFR St. Lawrence Island and to the Bering Strait, IFR for the central Arctic coast, IFR eastern North Gulf coast, and right along the coast of the Panhandle, improving over the southeast part of the Panhandle. And then for the afternoon, though, marginal VFR inside waters, IFR along the coast to Yakutat, southern Alaska marginal, northern Bering Sea, IFR, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Norton Sound, southern Seward Peninsula, IFR, and some IFR along the southern slopes of the western Alaska Range, eastern Arctic coast, most of the North Slope, VFR, some IFR, Adak, Atka, and Amchitka Islands. And for the passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR, trending toward VFR in the afternoon. Same trend for Adigan, starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out marginal, becoming IFR for both passes, probably by early afternoon. And same trend for Rainy as well, becoming IFR. Windy, VFR becoming marginal VFR. And the southern entrance possibly becoming IFR during the latter part of the afternoon. Isabel, VFR, trending toward marginal throughout the afternoon. And Mentesta stays VFR the entire day. While Tanita starts out VFR, just look for a deterioration in conditions, especially toward the eastern entrance. That'd be the best chance of running into any IFR. And Portage, IFR the entire day. Chilcoot and White, another VFR day coming up for those two passes. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet. They're just south of Nunivak Island across the North Gulf Coast. And Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, 4,000 feet over the central panhandle, 2,000 feet over the central Aleutians. Icing, considerable moderate with remnants of the frontal boundary there and all the moisture coming up to the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, then tapering off as you get down toward Kachemak Bay, in toward the Barren Island areas, Fognak Island, and most of the heavier icing will remain off the coast of the Panhandle, although some increasing threat exists along the coastline, especially up in toward Glacier Bay. And for the jet stream, sharp trough out over the Bering Sea from the Russian Far East, extending southeastward with one low center just north of the Alaska Peninsula. And we've got 185 knot jet across the Aleutians from the northwest. Southerlies over the interior, milder winds, 110 knots right out of the south into the eastern North Gulf Coast, 75 to 80 knots into the Panhandle. And for 9,000 feet, 65 knots south-southeast winds, Gulf of Alaska heading up to Prince William Sound, and pretty brisk right into the greater Fairbanks area, 45 knots, maybe even around 50 knots there over toward Nenana, and lighter up to the north, and 50 knotters right along the coast of the Panhandle, 80 knots over the western Aleutians, 3,000 feet. West-northwesterlies across all of the Bering, 35 to 55 knots, 55 to 65 knot winds, North Gulf Coast, north coast of the Panhandle, turbulence. A lot of moderate chop from the North Gulf Coast and the southeast coast and the Aleutians Alaska Peninsula.
Here at the end of the Earth, it still feels like a place for raw exploration and adventure. It's vast in all directions and ground zero for some of the biggest questions we have about the climate. But when we decided to make a series about the frozen places on Earth, we knew there would be one hurdle we would need to jump over first. What is the cryosphere?
The what?
Ooh.
I have no idea.
While I'm aware of the cryosphere, I don't actually know what it is.
It has something to do with ice. All right, that's all I got.
How do you get people acquainted with the cryosphere when most of us don't even know what it is?
Hey, so here we are in Washington, D.C., standing on the roof of NASA headquarters. That's the Capitol building right behind me. And what headquarters does is kind of serve as the focal point to connect the dots.
That's Dr. Tom Wagner, NASA's cryospheric program scientist at headquarters. In short, Tom is responsible for making sure NASA knows what the current status of the cryosphere is.
The cryosphere is everything from the snow that falls by your house to the icy reaches of the Himalayas, to the big ice sheets of Antarctica all the way at the South Pole, and also the frozen ground of the Arctic, and even some of that frozen ground that's currently under the ocean.
If you had to break it down, you'd have a mix of sea ice, snow cover, permafrost, ice sheets, and glaciers.
Right now, our best predictions are that sea levels will rise anywhere from 1 to 3 feet within the next 100 years. 3 feet of sea level rise has the potential to displace about 100 million people, which is a lot of people that need to find new homes.
Our current reality places us at a near tipping point, and the cryosphere is playing a huge part in that delicate balance.
So one of the things people don't know about NASA is that we study the Earth, and we've been doing that since NASA's inception back in the 1950s. And we study the frozen part of the Earth in a variety of ways.
Missions like SNOWX, Airborne Snow Observatory, Oceans Melting Greenland, Operation Icebridge, Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, and countless other labs and individual researchers stand at the forefront of monitoring the cryosphere. But this year was a particularly big year.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Grace Follow-On, continuing the legacy of the Grace mission of tracking the movement of water across our planet.
2 state-of-the-art satellite missions are being launched in a single year as part of a major attempt to understand Earth's frozen places. Our scientists are answering hard questions, sharing stories from the field, and giving their best predictions for what we can expect of a warming world. We're taking you with us as we follow NASA explorers on their journey to the frozen ends of the Earth as they study our rapidly changing world from satellites, planes, and boots on the ground.
What we can do really well from orbit is we can tell when a surface of land is covered in snow. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
What we think of snow depends a lot on where it falls. If you live in the eastern US, maybe it's fun. Or maybe it's just a pain.
But if you live in parts of the world where they depend on the water that's in the snow for a large fraction of their total water that they use for drinking, for agriculture, for industry, or for hydropower, the snow is a very important natural resource. For example, in the western part of the United States, 80 to 90% of their renewable water comes from snow.
Snow is one part of the cryosphere that many of us have actually encountered before, but it also plays a critical role in regulating the Earth's climate. Through decades of remote sensing, NASA has kept a close eye on the ebb and flow of snow cover.
We now have a 52-year record of snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere, and we can see changes in the extent of snow cover over the time period, particularly in the last few decades, where we can see that the snow cover has been retreating. It's been melting a lot earlier in the springtime.
The extent is relatively easy to do, and it has been done over the years. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
That tricky part is known as the snow-water equivalent, or how much water would actually be in a layer of snow if it melted. NASA and its partners have taken to the air to help solve this elusive mystery. First, there's the Airborne Snow Observatory, or ASO, a small plane outfitted with a couple of instruments, one of which measures snow depth using LiDAR. LiDAR measures distance using light from lasers. Since 2014, ASO has flown over basins in California and Colorado, taking before and after looks at snow depth. Scientists subtract the snow-free summer data from the snow-on winter data to get an idea of the snow depth. There's no single way to measure all types of snow across the globe, and so NASA's other airborne campaign, SNOWX, is testing different combinations of sensors. This winter, SNOWX will test a new instrument, the Snow-Water Equivalent Synthetic Aperture Radar and Radiometer, or SWISAR.
SWISAR consists of 2 main components, one of them being the radar and the second one being the radiometer.
So with the radar providing the depth of the snow and the radiometer providing the density of the snow, we could put those 2 things together and get the snow water equivalent Here in the chamber, we're going to measure different radiation patterns at our different frequencies and do some full system testing in this chamber. This chamber kind of enables us to isolate various types of radiation and interference. And in about a month, we're going to take the instrument, mount it on a Twin Otter in the Grand Mesa in Colorado, and we're going to fly it over the Grand Mesa and take various different measurements. This is what we call our engineering flight.
Making sure the sensors are calibrated is key in order to face the challenges nature will throw at them.
Half of the area that gets covered by snow every winter contains trees and forest. And the trees make it difficult for the sensors to see the snow that's underneath the trees, so it makes it difficult for us to measure how much snow there is. After the snow's had a chance to sit on the ground for a while, it gets denser and denser and denser over time, and it changes. Which is another reason why snow is very challenging to remotely sense. It doesn't stay the same. It's constantly changing. One of the things that we often do in the field is go dig what we call a snow pit. We literally dig a pit in the snow so we can see all the different layers. The layering is very important.
All this digging is part of ground truthing SnowX, a way of matching up what the airborne instruments see and what is actually sitting on the surface. The ultimate goal of SnowX is to figure out what the best combination of instruments would be for a future satellite mission in order to get a global picture of snow.
We need to know how much snow is in a snowpack, because if we have too much snow and the snow melts too fast, then you can get flooding. And if you don't have enough snow, or if the snow melts too early, that can lead to a longer wildfire season, a more intense drought, and we need to know these things for water resource planning.
After we had a record that was about 15, 20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at the sea ice analysis from 2 days ago, showing basically off the coast there all the way into Mackenzie River Delta. Some new ice forming there in the Delta, but looking at today's analysis, you can see quite an increase there of the ice Mackenzie River Delta, or I'm sorry, Mackenzie Bay, and along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Now linking up with the pack to the north with the new ice forming along the coast, especially mostly inside the Barrier Islands, and actually coming down, making southward progress all along the main ice edge. Backing that up again, you can see the whole ice edge shifting southward, but that's going to end and expected to begin to retreat northwestward all along the ice edge for a couple of days anyway, due to increasing and strong east winds and southeast winds pushing it back to the northwest, and then later on kind of going into a stationary status quo. Anyway, moving on to the coastal water forecast. Good gales for the coast. Southeast 40 knots on the central and south coast. Seas 25 to 30 feet. And east-southeast 35 to 45 knots on the north coast. Inside waters, much lighter winds, especially in Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, north at 15. North winds 20 knots, but gale force gusts to 40 knots for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait, small craft advisories. Southeast winds 25 knots. Outlook for Wednesday, Clarence Strait, southeast at 20, northeast 20, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inside channels north at 15. Gale warnings continue along the coast, central and south coast, southeast 35 to 40 knots, and for the north coast, east and southeast, 25 to 35 knots with 16 to 18 foot seas. North Gulf Coast tomorrow, Middleton Island zone there, east 45 knots, 26 foot seas, small craft advisories, Prince William Sound, east at 25. Northern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots, south of the Forelands, a little stronger, sustained at 30 knots from the north. Northeast 30 knots, Kamishak Bay, western North Gulf Coast, Barren Islands, northeast winds 40 knots, seas 20 to 25 feet. Those come down considerably, going variable. 15 knots for the Barren Islands and western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast at 25. Prince William Sound, east winds at 20 knots, seas coming down to 4 feet. Cook Inlet, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas, and Kamishak Bay, northwest at 20. Kodiak Island, north to northwest tomorrow, 30 knots, 8 to 18 foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, west winds 25 to 30 knots, 9 to 12 foot seas, highest on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Bristol Bay, south winds 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, west winds 30 knots, west winds 20 knots for Bristol Bay, but seas up to 8 feet. Kodiak Island looking at lighter winds, west 15 to 20 knots. And for the Fox Islands, on Alaska Island, west winds 30 knots. Gale warnings for Unmak Island, west winds 35 knots. Same thing for Adak, Amchitka, Kiska, Shimei, and Attu, all west 35 knots. And for Wednesday, Shimei to Kiska, north winds 35 knots. Amchitka Island and Adak and Atka, southwest 40 to 45 knots, seas 15 to 20 feet. Got near storm force winds for the Fox Islands out of the west and southwest, 45 to 50 knots with 13 to 22 foot seas. Southwest coast, west-southwest 20 knots, seas 10 to 12 feet. Small craft advisory, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Winds will be 30 knots there from the east for St. Lawrence Island, southeast to Norton Sound. West 30 knots for the Pribilof, seas just under 20 feet. St. Matthew Island southwest at 25. And the outlook for Wednesday, Pribilof, southwest 30 knots, west 25 knots, northern Bering Sea into the southwest coast, and St. Lawrence Island north at 15. For the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, looking at small craft advisories, east winds sustained 30 knots, 4 to 5 foot sea. Gale warnings for the western Arctic coast, 35 knots out of the east, seas 10 feet. Small craft advisories from Cape Beaufort to Wales for east winds 25 to 30 knots, seas around 10 feet. Winds diminishing in that area from Wales to Cape Thompson down to 15 knots and 20 knots Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. But small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast northeast at 30 knots, and gale warnings for the eastern Arctic coast over toward demarcation point there, 35 knots out of the east. And for tonight, light winds, areas of low clouds and fog for the eastern Arctic coast, maybe some flurries as well continuing. And but dry over interior Alaska. Better chance of rain for the North Gulf Coast, a little bit increasing, maybe pushing into Portage, Whittier area, and maybe along the coast, and then the out west there, that front weakening, but pushing some moisture inland tonight with a couple of troughs and good west-northwest flow south of that low center near St. Lawrence Island. And for the outlook on Wednesday, a little better chance.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.